Imagine a group of soldiers from 1903, their faces captured in a photograph immortalized in time. But what if I told you that, over a century later, this very photograph would send shockwaves through the world of historical research? What could possibly be so extraordinary about an old military photo? Well, that's exactly what happened when researchers stumbled upon an incredible discovery, one that changed everything we thought we knew about early photography. It all began when Maria Petro, a diligent museum worker, found a long-lost photograph in the dusty archives of the GMA History Museum. The image, which depicted over 1,000 soldiers from the Cexhol Regiment, seemed ordinary at first glance. However, as Maria dusted off the old photograph, she realized something was off, something extraordinary about this image. The clarity of the faces was beyond anything expected for the technology of the early 1900s. When Maria showed the photograph to her colleague, the museum director, he was equally stunned. Cameras from that era simply couldn't produce such high-definition images, and yet there it was. This photo seemed to defy all logic. The soldiers stood in neat rows, every face clearly visible, and even the smallest details, like cigarette butts scattered in the grass, were sharp enough to make the viewer wonder if the image had been tampered with. Maria and the director immediately knew they had stumbled upon something monumental. What they didn't expect was how much this single photograph would unravel. A mystery centuries old was waiting to be uncovered, and it would change the way historians viewed military photography forever. This wasn't just a picture of soldiers. It was a glimpse into a secret history. Now the real shock came a few days later, when a young technician named Alexei began digitizing the photograph. As he scanned the massive image, his eyes widened in disbelief. The details were beyond anything anyone had ever seen. Buttons, medals, and even the expressions on the soldiers' faces were clear as day. This kind of resolution should have been impossible, especially for an image taken over a century ago. And yet, there it was, in all its glory. What baffled Alexei and his team the most was the sheer size of the photograph. The negative itself was 110x16 maparum, much larger than most photographs from that era. As Alexei zoomed in even further, it was clear that the photograph had been taken using equipment far ahead of its time. The technology used to capture this image simply shouldn't have existed in 1903. The more they examined the photograph, the more questions arose. The photographer had clearly paid an incredible amount of attention to detail, as if every soldier's placement had been meticulously planned. Even the smallest nuances, like the puffed cheeks of one soldier holding a cigarette, hinted at a hidden story behind the image. Could it be that there was more to this photograph than a simple military portrait? At this point, the mystery only deepened. The museum contacted historians and experts from all over the world to help solve the riddle. What they found in the photograph didn't just raise questions about the equipment used, it also raised the possibility that this was not just a commemorative photograph of a regiment, but a cover for something far more secretive. What if this photo was actually a test of cutting-edge military technology? Join me as we dig deeper into this century-old mystery and uncover the shocking secrets hidden in this extraordinary photograph. You won't believe what they discovered next. As the team continued to pore over every detail of the photograph, they couldn't shake the feeling that there was something far more extraordinary going on. The story of how this photo came to be was beginning to feel like a work of fiction. But the evidence was right in front of them. This photograph wasn't just a regular military portrait, it was something far more significant. But the most surprising discovery was still ahead. Just as the researchers were piecing together their findings, a breakthrough came from a most unexpected source. An elderly visitor named Victor Magini. Victor, a local resident, had come to see the famous photograph after reading about it in the newspaper. He had no idea that his visit would change everything. When Victor saw the photograph, something clicked. He pointed to a soldier standing proudly in the front row and asked to speak with the researchers. His excitement was palpable. "That's my grandfather," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "His name was Fedos Korotki. He used to tell me stories about that day." This revelation sent shockwaves through the research team. They hadn't just found an extraordinary photograph, they had found a personal connection, a living link to the past. Victor eagerly shared the stories his grandfather had told him, and these tales shed light on the day the photograph was taken, confirming some of the details the researchers had observed. According to Victor, the photograph had been taken on the occasion of the regiment commander's retirement. The soldiers had spent an entire day preparing for the perfect shot. It was a monumental event for them. But the most intriguing part of the story came when Victor recalled something his grandfather had shared with him. "My grandfather even lit a cigarette while standing on the scaffolding," Victor explained. When the command came to hold, still for the photo, he held the cigarette in his fist but didn't have time to let the smoke out. That's why his cheeks are puffed out in the picture. This new information brought clarity to a mystery that had puzzled the researchers. The soldier with the puffed cheeks. It was no longer a strange anomaly. It was the result of a real human moment in time. The team zoomed in on the soldier's face, and sure enough, the puffed cheeks matched Victor's grandfather's story perfectly. But there was more to the story. Victor's grandfather also described the camera used to take the photograph. According to him, the photographer's equipment was unlike anything the soldiers had ever seen. "The camera was enormous," Victor explained. "My grandfather said it was as big as a small car, with a lens as large as a dinner plate." This revelation was the key to understanding the mystery of the photograph. The camera Victor's grandfather described sounded like something from the future, not from 1903. It was as if the camera had come from a time far ahead of its own. This sent the researchers into overdrive as they began to rethink everything. They thought they knew about the technology of the time. They realized that the camera used to take the photograph was likely an experimental piece of military technology, one that had been kept secret for decades. It was becoming clearer that this wasn't just a simple group shot. It was a deliberate act of showcasing cutting-edge optical technology under the guise of a regimental photograph. The next phase of the research took the team down a different path. They began investigating the background of the photograph. As they zoomed in on the edges, something unusual caught their attention: surveying equipment. Why would there be surveying tools at a military photo shoot? The question lingered in their minds. To answer this, the team began combing through historical archives, hoping to find something that could explain the presence of this equipment. What they uncovered was shocking: a reference to a secret optical research division within the Imperial Russian military. This division was rumored to be developing advanced photographic equipment for military reconnaissance. Could it be that the real purpose of the regimental photograph was not to commemorate the soldiers but to test this experimental technology? The idea seemed far-fetched, but the pieces were starting to fit together. The more the researchers dug, the more they found evidence that supported this theory. Then, in a military journal from 1904, they found a vague reference to the very kind of optical equipment that had been field-tested at the Cexhol Regiment headquarters. It was a breakthrough moment. The photograph, they realized, wasn't just a beautiful shot of the soldiers. It was a cover for military testing, a covert operation to test new technology. Meanwhile, Maria, the museum worker, became fascinated, not only by the technology behind the photo, but by the soldiers themselves. The level of detail in the photograph allowed her to start identifying the soldiers, and through military records, she began to trace their life stories. This wasn't just a picture, it was a window into the past, a story waiting to be told. Maria's research uncovered fascinating details about the Cexhol Lifeguards Regiment, which had a distinguished history dating back to its founding in 1710 by Emperor Peter I. The regiment had participated in numerous wars across Europe and beyond, leaving behind a rich legacy. As Maria delved deeper into the stories of the soldiers, she began to identify individual members of the regiment, using the photograph to reconnect them with their descendants. Through this process, Maria was able to uncover personal stories, passed down through generations. Some families shared letters from their ancestors, describing the painstaking process of arranging the soldiers for the perfect shot, while others provided personal mementos like a pocket watch, clearly visible, in the hands of one of the soldiers. The photograph had become more than just a historical artifact. It was a personal connection to the past. One of the most moving stories came from Anastasia, an elderly woman who recognized her grandfather in the photograph. He always said, "It was the proudest day of his life," she said, her voice thick with emotion. It turned out that the day of the photograph wasn't just significant because of the ceremony. It was the day her grandfather had been promoted for acts of bravery. As Maria zoomed in on Anastasia's grandfather's uniform, she saw something extraordinary, a freshly pinned medal that hadn't appeared in any official records of the regiment. This was more than just a family memory. It was a piece of forgotten history, brought to light by the remarkable clarity of the photograph. The more the team uncovered, the more they realized the photograph's true significance. It wasn't just an extraordinary piece of military history, it was a living, breathing document, connecting the past to the present in ways no one could have anticipated. As news of these discoveries spread, the GMA History Museum saw an unprecedented surge in visitors. People from all over the world came to see the photograph, eager to learn about the soldiers it depicted and the astonishing technology behind it. And with every new discovery, the photograph continued to captivate audiences, revealing more and more about a moment in time that had been forgotten by history. As the research continued, the story behind the 1903 photograph took another unexpected turn. The discovery of the advanced optical equipment used to capture the image had already sent shockwaves through the historical community, but it was the discovery of a second photograph that truly upended everything they thought they knew about early military photography. Months after the initial findings, Maria, still deeply invested in the story of the regiment and its soldiers, came across a lead that would once again alter the trajectory of the research. While reviewing records from another museum, she found an image that seemed remarkably similar to the legendary Cexhol Lifeguards Regiment photo. It depicted soldiers from the St. Petersburg Lifeguards Regiment, another prestigious unit from the Russian Imperial Army. What was most striking about this new photograph was its stunningly high level of detail, eerily similar to the first. Could this be the same camera? Maria, filled with excitement and disbelief, called the research team together for another round of scrutiny. When they scanned the new image, they were shocked to find that it too revealed cigarette butts in the grass and minute details of the soldiers' uniforms, details that shouldn't have been possible with the equipment of the time. What seemed like a coincidence now appeared to be part of a larger pattern. The lens, once thought to be a secret military experiment, had likely been used in multiple photographs of Russian military regiments. This discovery prompted the team to dig even deeper into the origins of the camera and the revolutionary optical technology it represented. Further research revealed an astonishing theory. The camera used in both photographs was part of an experimental military program aimed at advancing reconnaissance technology. This was not just about preserving history or taking a group photo. It was about testing a new form of military surveillance equipment under the guise of a ceremonial portrait. The camera's enormous lens, capable of capturing fine details from great distances, could have been designed for aerial reconnaissance, a game-changing tool for gathering intelligence. Dr. Vulov, the lead historian on the project, was the first to suggest that these photographs were a cover for military experimentation. What if these photo shoots were not just for show, but also a way to field test this advanced optical equipment, he mused. This theory gained momentum when the team discovered references to secret reconnaissance projects in Russian military archives. It seemed that the Cexhol Regiment photograph was part of a much larger, more covert operation to develop cutting-edge military technology. But the biggest revelation came when the team uncovered a mention of a Russian optical engineer named Nikolai Verv. Verv, it turned out, had designed the lenses used in the mysterious camera. His work was considered groundbreaking, and it was rumored that he had been developing military-grade optical technology for reconnaissance purposes long before the public was aware of such innovations. Tragically, much of his work was lost during the Russian Revolution, and with it any records of the camera that had been used in these extraordinary photographs. As the story unfolded, it became clear that the photographs were not just historical artifacts, they were testaments to a hidden chapter of military history. The discovery of these photographs and the technology behind them changed everything historians thought they knew about early 20th century military innovation. The camera had been ahead of its time, designed for purposes far beyond a simple, regimental photograph. Meanwhile, the impact of the photograph continued to grow, not just in academic circles, but also among the descendants of the soldiers who had been captured in that iconic shot. Maria's investigation had already helped reconnect over 200 soldiers with their families, but as the story spread, more and more descendants came forward to learn about their ancestors' roles in the photograph. For many of them, the photograph was a doorway to a forgotten past, bringing their family histories to life in ways they had never imagined. One family, for example, brought in a letter from their great-grandfather, one of the soldiers in the photo. The letter, which had been passed down through generations, described how the soldiers had been lined up for hours to get the perfect shot. "The photographer was more strict than our commanding officer," the letter read. This personal connection added yet another layer of depth to the story, making the photograph not just a historical record, but a living testament to the soldiers' experiences. For Maria, the most emotional moment came when Victor Mageni, the elderly man who had identified his grandfather in the photograph, returned to the museum with his entire family. Victor's voice cracked with emotion as he gazed at the photograph of his grandfather, the man he had heard so much about in stories growing up. "He would never have believed this," Victor said, his voice thick with emotion, "that my great-great-grandchildren would one day look at his face like this, so clearly, so vividly." It was a moment that transcended history. The photograph had become more than just a piece of the past. It had become a bridge between generations, connecting the living with those who had come before them. As the research into the photographs continued, the museum began to draw visitors from all over the world. People were fascinated by the incredible level of detail in the photos, and many were moved by the personal connections that were being made. The museum's exhibitions expanded, and it became a hub for people interested in learning more about the soldiers who had posed for the photograph and the technology behind it. But even as the museum became a popular destination, the research team was still uncovering new secrets. Months later, they decided to examine the edges of the photograph more closely, areas that had previously been overlooked. What they discovered would change everything once again. At the edges of the photo, hidden behind a tent flap, they noticed something that had previously been dismissed as unimportant: a second camera. This camera, like the first, appeared far too advanced for its time. The lens was enormous, almost a meter wide, and the framework was intricate, allowing for precise adjustments. It was another stunning revelation. There had been more than one camera used to take the photograph. Could this second camera explain the remarkable level of detail captured in the photo? The research team believed so, and with this discovery, they found further evidence that the cameras used in the Cexhol Regiment and St. Petersburg photographs were part of a larger military experiment to develop cutting-edge optical technology. As the research culminated in a groundbreaking paper, the Cexhol Regiment photograph became a symbol of a forgotten era, an era when military innovation was taking place in secret, far ahead of what history had documented. The researchers had uncovered not only the story of a photograph, but a hidden chapter of military history that had been erased from the public record. But the story wasn't over yet. As new discoveries continued to surface, the museum remained a place of ongoing revelation, where the past was still speaking, waiting to be understood by those willing to listen. As the research reached its final stages, the profound impact of the Cexhol Regiment photograph began to resonate far beyond the museum's walls. The extraordinary discoveries had not only altered the course of military photography history, but they had also reshaped how people viewed their connection to the past. For many, this photograph was no longer just an artifact. It was a bridge to understanding the personal histories of their ancestors and how technology, often hidden in the shadows of history, shaped the world we live in today. The momentum continued to build, with more and more individuals coming forward to learn about the soldiers in the photograph, and the museum itself became a symbol of historical discovery. People traveled from far and wide, some hoping to see their ancestors in the photograph, others simply captivated by the story of the advanced technology behind the lens that had captured it. But as the public's fascination grew, the research team's work was far from finished. They had already uncovered a great deal about the photograph's history, from the cutting-edge technology used to capture the image to the fascinating human stories it had revealed. But there was still one last piece of the puzzle that needed to be solved: the mysterious second camera, the one hidden at the edges of the Cexhol Regiment photograph. The camera had been dismissed as an irrelevant detail in the early stages of their research, but after the discovery of the second similar photograph, it became clear that this camera was far more important than anyone had realized. The research team decided to look into the camera's technology more closely, hoping to uncover the secrets it held. As they analyzed the details of the photograph, they realized that the second camera was likely designed to work in tandem with the first one. The enormous lens, with its precise adjustments, seemed to be part of a larger system, a complex piece of equipment meant to capture every detail from multiple angles. The discovery raised more questions than answers, especially when the team learned that there were no historical records of a camera like this ever existing. The more they investigated, the more they became convinced that the camera had been a prototype, a precursor to the advanced surveillance technology that would later shape the military landscape of the 20th century. The lens was so large and precise that it could easily be used for long-range reconnaissance. And what was even more surprising was the idea that this technology was being tested under the cover of a routine military event, a photograph meant to commemorate a regiment's ceremonial moment. The camera, hidden in plain sight during a regimental photo shoot, may have been the key to military leaders' growing interest in developing optical equipment for reconnaissance. What the researchers were uncovering now wasn't just a story about photography. It was a story about the secret military innovations that had been designed and tested during a pivotal time in history. But the team didn't just stop at uncovering the technological secrets. They had already connected the photograph to the soldiers' descendants, and these personal stories were just as compelling as the technological discoveries. One of the most touching stories came from the family of a soldier who had spent years writing letters to his loved ones about the day the photograph was taken. The letters, which had been carefully preserved over the years, described the rigorous process of lining up the soldiers for the perfect shot. "We stood there for hours trying to hold perfectly still," the letter read. "The photographer was a perfectionist. Some of us even joked that he was stricter than our officers." These letters provided a rare glimpse into the lives of the soldiers who had posed for the photo, turning the picture from a historical record into a living memory. Another family shared a pocket watch that had been given to one of the soldiers as a gift the day the photograph was taken. The watch was visible in the soldier's hand in the photo, a poignant reminder of the personal significance the event had for these men. This was not just a photograph, it was a living, breathing artifact imbued with the emotions and stories of those who had been a part of it. As the research team pieced together the final pieces of the puzzle, they realized that they had uncovered something far more than a single photograph. They had discovered a hidden chapter of history, one that had been overshadowed by time. The photograph had not only revealed advanced military technology, but had also connected families to their ancestral pasts in a way that was previously unimaginable. For many, this discovery was not just an academic achievement, it was a deeply personal journey. And as for the museum, it had become a place of pilgrimage for people all over the world. What had started as a small local institution had now grown into an international destination, drawing thousands of visitors eager to learn more about the photograph and the extraordinary story behind it. The exhibition dedicated to the Cexhol Regiment photograph became one of the most visited in the museum's history, with people flocking to see the iconic image up close and learn about the groundbreaking research that had brought it to life. But what about the future? What else could be discovered from this single photograph? The research team continued to explore the possibilities. They knew that the photograph was a window into a world of untold stories, and as technology advanced, they hoped that more secrets would be uncovered. The journey of uncovering the story behind the Cexhol Regiment photograph had taught the team, and the world, a valuable lesson. History is not static. It's a living, breathing thing, constantly evolving as we uncover new details and gain fresh perspectives. Sometimes the past can surprise us, revealing hidden layers that we never thought possible. And as Maria stood before the photograph, one final time reflecting on all that had been discovered, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. This photograph, once thought to be just a historical relic, had connected generations, unearthed technological marvels, and revealed stories that would have otherwise remained forgotten. It was a reminder that history is never truly gone. It's just waiting to be rediscovered. Through this photograph, Maria said to a reporter standing nearby, "We've learned something remarkable. Time doesn't erase the past. It simply waits for us to look closer, to ask the right questions, to see what's been hidden in plain sight."